Welcome to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, where we aim to break down barriers, demystify blindness, and promote real and lasting change. Join host David Steinmetz as he connects us with professionals who are making a positive impact in the community. These leaders help empower individuals who are blind or have other disabilities to live a full and inclusive life. Let's lean in as David kicks off today's conversation.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this episode of Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time. This show is about connecting with thought leaders, organizations, and individuals in the community who are dedicated to improving the lives of people who are blind and creating full inclusion in the community. I'm your host, David Steinmetz. I'm really excited for today's show today. We have Mr. Steve Welker. Steve is a motivational speaker. He is the chairman of the board for Arizona Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired, as well as an author of two books. The first book Steve wrote is The World at My Fingertips, Triumph Over Tragedy. And he co-authored a book with Dr. Christine Welker on Radical Resiliency. So I'm really excited. We'll talk a little bit more about radical resiliency throughout the conversation today, as well as Steve's story. Steve, besides just having this great background and things that you're doing in the community, you also had a very full and business professional life. Would you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and your professional life?
You bet, David. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be on. It's just a pleasure. So after I graduated from ASU with a business degree, I started my career in the insurance field in property and casualty. And I worked initially for companies. I worked for Transamerica Insurance and Westfield Insurance. And I did that for about 10 years. And then I went to the other side and I worked as a commercial insurance broker here in Phoenix. It was a really interesting career. A lot of people think it was probably boring, but there are some great people. I've still got friends from that industry, and I couldn't have picked a better one. I felt really blessed that I'd fallen into such a great career field.
Fantastic. And I appreciate you giving that background. So let's really kick off our show here. I really think that this is going to be informative to our listeners, to our audience out there, in terms of multiple factors. One, the triumph over tragedy, and tying in with that radical resiliency about, I think those things kind of go hand in hand, as well as what we're doing here, changing the perception, is really how do you overcome mindsets, or how do you change your own mindset and move forward in life, no matter what that is, so that you can live a more happy life, full life, and not just personally, but as a professional as well. And so I think it's a really great connection to what you're doing in your motivational speaking and your training programs, as well as the work that you do at ACBVI. So, Steve, if you wouldn't mind sharing, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your background in terms of your blindness and how it was that you lost your vision.
You bet, David. So until I was 37 years old, I had perfect vision, and I'd never given blindness another thought. And one day, my wife and I were traveling north on 68th Street in Scottsdale, and an impaired driver was being involved in a slow speed pursuit. The police were behind him with their lights on, but it was a slow speed pursuit. So I pulled my Jeep Cherokee up onto the sidewalk, thinking they were just going to pass us by. But what happened was the vehicle that was being pursued suddenly jumped the center median. I didn't catch that. And it hit us head on. And it threw the Jeep Cherokee into the middle of the intersection on its roof. And it completely crushed the driver's compartment. My wife had to be extricated from the vehicle. She was taken over to Scottsdale Memorial Hospital. She'd broken both of her clavicles, crushed her left foot, and had a TBI, traumatic brain injury. She ended up spending about 12 days in the hospital. I was flown over to what used to be Maricopa County Hospital over on Roosevelt, and I wasn't supposed to survive the day. I had sustained such a blow to my head My brain was swelling. A shunt had to be installed. It was nip and tuck there for a while.
Mm.
In that process of the brain swelling, it caused a stroke of my optic nerve, which was going to leave me blind. They didn't know that at the time, but at that time, they put me into a drug-induced coma so that I could heal. And so when I came out of the coma, I had a TBI, and they didn't know if I'd be able to talk. Well, obviously, I can talk. I had no problem with that. And so at about this time, our twin baby boys, Colton and Dylan, were born while I was coming out of my coma.
Oh, my.
Yeah, but when I was told about this, I was in such a brain fog, I couldn't even process it.
Mm-hmm.
I barely knew who I was, much less that I'd become a father. And so it was a very challenging time. And I just thought, David, my life was over. I mean, what can I do as a blind guy? Really, I spent 2 months in the hospital. I got out, and I'm like, I can't do this. Steve Welker isn't supposed to be blind. And so I remember distinctly one evening I was sitting on my couch in my family room feeling sorry for myself. And I had every reason to feel sorry for myself. And I heard those boys laughing and cooing in their high chairs. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Those boys need a father. And my wife needs a husband. Yeah, I may not be the father or the husband I thought I was going to be, but I got to figure this out because I had two choices. One was to crawl into a ball, figure out a way to get through it, which wasn't going to look pretty, or ask for some outside help. Right. I was able to do the latter and put my life back together.
Wow, that's a very impactful story, Steve, and thank you for sharing that with us today. Paralleling to my situation, in terms of that blindness, right, is coming into something that is so unfamiliar to unimaginable and having to really overcome your own perception of what a blind person is. You mentioned, sitting on the couch and how am I going to do this? How am I going to be a good and perfect husband, a good father? How am I going to raise my children? All those things went through my mind as well when I was diagnosed, but later in life, because I just felt like, okay, there's nothing to this blindness until one day, a light pole went off on the side of my head. Did I realize that there is actually something to blindness and worked my way through those scenarios and trauma of loss, and then coming out on the other side of being, who I'm meant to be. So it sounds very parallel stories, but different situations. So thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned that as you were sitting on the couch looking, thinking about how you're going to do this, I'm assuming you went and received some rehabilitation services. You want to share a little bit about that for our audience maybe today?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. So once I figured out that I needed to get rehab, my wife pulled out the yellow pages. And for your younger listeners that don't know what yellow pages are, we used to get these huge books with all the phone numbers in it. And you had white pages for residential and yellow pages for business. And she looks up blindness and she finds this agency called the Arizona Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and that they did rehabilitation. And, again, we knew nothing about this. And so we went down there, and our initial visits were just counseling, helping me to understand what it's going to mean to be a blind person in a sighted world, helping her to understand what it's going to mean to be married to a blind man. This is not what she signed up for. And studies will show you that 90% of the time, marriages don't stay together. But I was so fortunate that she wasn't going to let us be a statistic. She was going to make sure that we were able to make our marriage work one way or another. From there, I went over to the daily living skills training. When you lose your sight, you have to learn how to do everything all over again. Cooking, cleaning, showering, shaving, everything you can think of has to be done in a different way. And so I learned those skills at the center. We have a demo kitchen at the center, where they taught me how to cook and, how to not kill myself in the process. Also, how to put bump dots on things like microwave and ovens and washers and dryers, all the things that you need to do just to function in your home. Also went to orientation and mobility. how to use a white cane on a sighted guide, how to get around again without killing yourself. I learned all those things at the center. But the most important thing I learned at the center, I believe, I guess not most important, nothing's more important than getting around without killing yourself.
Right.
But another important thing I learned was adaptive computer technology training. So I started learning first of all, I had to learn how to type. I didn't know how to type. And so my wife, my patient, amazing wife, sat with me and taught me how to type. And then I learned how to use something called the screen reader. And a screen reader, as many of your listeners probably know, is something that does just that. It reads to a blind person what's on the screen, and we maneuver it with keypad. What a great piece of technology that is. And so once I learned that, it leveled the playing field for me. I was able to use email, word processing documents, get on the internet, all this stuff. And I was doing stuff I couldn't even do. I didn't do when I was sighted. It was just amazing to learn that skill. And once I had that skill mastered, a year after my accident, I went back to work. I was working for an insurance agency in Phoenix, and they created an inside position for me. And I was able to go back to work. And I tell you, David, it was scary going back to work. I'm going down those aisles of every department and I'm tapping my cane. A hush would come over the department as I went in. All these people that had last seen me as a sighted person see me trying to get down these hallways as a blind person. And they're thinking, how's he going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's what they're thinking because that's what I was thinking. How am I going to do this?
Yep.
But day by day, week by week, you build the confidence. You start to be productive in the workplace again. And you know this, David, I can't overestimate how much of your self-esteem you get from your career. And I thought I'd lost that, but I didn't. I was able to go back to work. And then about a year later, I decided to open my own insurance agency. And I did that for myself. I wanted to prove to myself that I could run a business, basically just be able to be functional. I ran that independent agency in the Southeast Valley for about 10 years, really enjoyed doing it, but I felt like God had more planned for me. Nothing wrong with being an insurance agent, but I thought there was just more that I should be doing. And so I sold the agency and I initially finished my book, World at My Fingertips, which is my autobiography. And up to that point, I had been a volunteer spokesperson for the Valley of the Sun United Way. I'd done that for like a decade. And I really liked telling my story. And so I expanded and I decided to do, I call it motivational speaking for lack of a better term, but it's more resiliency training, just teaching people that everybody has challenges. Maybe mine and yours is a little bit more obvious than most, but everybody has challenges. And, you need to figure out a way to overcome those challenges. So I went out on the road and me and my trusty guide, Doug Orbit, and my assistant, and we traveled the country for several years, just telling that message. And it was so rewarding. And it was just such I'm so thankful for it is all I can say.
Wow, very very impactful about the training and we talk in the industry and the rehab services, vocational rehabilitation services. It's more than just preparing somebody for a job, right? It's teaching all the other life skills because those things that you do in your daily life at home or grocery shopping, cooking, etc., or even out in the community, all contribute to your success as an employee. You have to be able to show up on time and be prepared, uh, dressed appropriately, etc., and take care of all the outside things before you're even ready to go to work. So those skills have to be taught first, as well as as you mentioned, assistive technology that levels the playing field is crucial to that. I wonder if you don't mind if I ask, what that conversation might have been, as my audience were focused on connecting to business leaders and organizations that may want or have ideas about hiring people with disabilities, but often wonder, what that looks like. You mentioned everybody kind of that hush in the room as you walk down the hallways wondering how this is going to happen. What did that initial conversation, if you don't mind me asking, seem like to you, Steve?
Um, my initial conversation when I went back to work.
Yes, sir.
Well, I contacted my old employer, and I'm very fortunate they were receptive to it because I had learned all this stuff at ACBVI that blind people could work and they could be productive, but most people don't know that. And so I had to show my past employer that I could do it. And so I literally had them come down to ACBVI and I showed them how the screen reader worked and how I could access all these different programs. They were so impressed with it that they offered to purchase all my hardware and
Mm.
software for me. And so I came back to work and my computer was there. JAWS was already installed and I just had to get to work. And again, I'm just fortunate because I know it's not that easy for everybody.
Hmm. That's amazing. And oftentimes, whether it's in a job interview or coming into an organization, is really you have to demonstrate your capabilities, right? And you have to set yourself above the other candidates if you're interviewing for a job. And when you walk into a room with a cane or a guide dog, or maybe even having some vision, having a visual impairment, that you don't need a mobility tool, but you have that added, I would call it stress or added factor that you have to prove and demonstrate that you can do the job and the technology is there. So I always encourage people that I meet with when talking to them about bring a computer with you, bring a stylus and a scribe in, and take notes or pull up your notes that you have questions for the interviewer. It helps, I think, alleviate some of the fear unknown from that other side of the desk, and also shows that you're prepared for that interview or that conversation. So great that the insurance company was willing to come down to ACBVI and see firsthand that you have, one, you have the skills to do it, and two, the technology that it empowers you to do it.
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate. I realized that, that's one of our challenges at ACBVI is getting employers to understand that with some accommodations, blind, visually impaired, hearing impaired people can be very productive.
Yeah, absolutely. So through your path through blindness and learning, and as you mentioned, you went out and started talking to organizations and different groups about resiliency and writing the book with your wife, Radical Resiliency. Can you tell us more about what that looks like, what that training program looks like, and things that organizations or individual audience members will gain from that?
You mean from writing a book?
From Radical Resiliency and
Oh,
understanding,
okay.
and I can imagine writing a book with your wife was great and great experience.
Oh, that's good you imagined that, David. I liken it to wallpapering a room with your wife. It could be challenging. She's a better editor than me. And so, we had some back and forths, but
Sure.
we're still married. It probably made the marriage stronger. But so let me tell you, my wife went on, she was a pharmaceutical sales rep at Bristol Myers Squibb when we got married. But after the accident, she wanted to do more. So she went back to school and she got her doctorate in psychology and became a counselor. For her doctoral thesis, her theme was resiliency. And imagine that.
Mhm.
And so, what she discovered were some keys to overcoming challenges, which I incorporated into what I call radical resiliency. And they are quite simply three things: the resiliency triangle. That's one, you have to have the proper attitude. If you got a bad attitude, whether you can see or not, you're not going to be successful.
Mhm.
And so, some of the sub areas there, you're not born with a positive or or negative attitude. Some people think I was just born this way. Well, that's bunk. You can be about as happy as you make up your mind to be. Also, you need to learn how to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. It's easy to have negative thoughts when things are going poorly,
Mhm.
but you have to train your brain to think of something positive. It's hard. It's hard. I remember when my sons were 16. We went down to get them their first car at CarMax. So we go down there and we're doing all the paperwork and all that. It's all very exciting. And then we're going to go out and get the car and drive it off the lot. And we're walking from the sales desk to the car, and I almost lost it. I was just so mad because here's this pivotal moment in my son's lives, in my life, and I can't see it. I can't see that car out there. I can't see the joy on my son's faces. And I almost lost it. And then I had to bite my tongue and say, if I start crying right now, I'm going to ruin this day for everybody. I need to replace that negative thought with a positive one. And by the time we got out to that car, I was able to do a 180 and say, no, I need to get back in line here. Or I'm going to ruin everybody's day. I was able to do that. Also, you need to keep active. If you just want to sit around and mope all day, it's going to turn negative. So you need to figure out things you can do in your life, whether you're working or you're retired, to stay active. You also need to find the silver lining. There's always some silver lining. You just do the best you can to find it. And then finally, you got to keep a sense of humor. There were times where my wife and I, we just thought we couldn't go on, and something funny would happen, and you just got to go with it. So we push the sense of humor. The second point of the resiliency triangle is that you need to have a strong support group. So that support group may only be one person. It may be a team. It may be your spouse. It may not be your spouse. It's got to be somebody on your side cheering you on, telling you that you can do it. Now, maybe you have to have a counselor to help you with this, or somebody at your church or your synagogue, or any place you can find one. But you've got to have some kind of a positive support team to help you on. Finally, the third point of the triangle, excuse me, is to volunteer, to give back. It's a great place to find a support team. I found it at ACBVI. I got more from them than they ever got from me. But join some kind of a group, whether it's a social group or a not-for-profit, whatever it may be, something that can help you to interact and to give you a sense of purpose and to make you feel like you're doing something. So basically, those three key points of the triangle are the ones I packaged up for radical resiliency. And those are the ones that I talk about in my speeches.
Yeah, very important. Really is, and those key elements there, the triangle, and having that positive attitude. A lot of times, and what helps spur my show is having these conversations with rideshare drivers or others out on the street who say, oh, I couldn't survive if I lost my vision. And I said it almost in the same exact way. We didn't talk beforehand about this, but really it's, what, we all have challenges in our life, and we have to find ways to overcome those challenges, right? And we have a family to support, ourselves to support. Yes, because my eyes don't work doesn't mean that my brain doesn't work, or that I'm able to function and do the things that I want to do. And when you're faced with a situation, whether it's a injury, disability, family issues, divorce, loss of job, whatever, we all have some form of challenge in our life, and we have to kind of dig deep and find that inner strength to move forward. And it's very easy to sit in a place, fear, unknown, or negative thoughts, and they just kind of continue to build on that. So I think that's really important. You mentioned activities and volunteering, and volunteering at ACBVI. How long have you been with that organization?
Well, starting out there as a client and then eventually joining the board, I've been there over 25 years. And over those years, I've seen a lot of changes, a lot of exciting things going on. But it's like that Eagles Hotel California song, I can check out, but I can never leave. That's the way I feel, and I'm thankful for that.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And through that, I've connected with you through ACBVI as well, and as a chair, as a board member for myself. I'm really able to see the transformation, people coming in, not knowing where their life's going to go and coming out of the program, having a sense of direction, purpose, and it's more than just teaching the technology. It's really creating and helping heal the whole person. I believe in what the stories, clients that we meet, and stories that are told by those clients at ACBVI. It's just incredible. Steve, other things that you do in your personal life, you mentioned also one of those is keeping active as a person who is blind, and maybe debunk some of the perceptions, right, that what someone who's blind can do. What are some of your activities that you like to do in your free time?
Yeah, I've been able to pick up a bunch of things I did before. And that happened slowly, didn't happen all at once. But one of them is playing golf. I was an avid golfer before the accident. I was an insurance agent. So, of course, I was an avid golfer. But I learned that there are a lot of really good blind golfers out there. I'm not one of them, but what I learned about golf is the beauty is just getting out there on a nice sunny day and being with your buddies and smelling the grass, So
Hmm.
I don't score that well. I cheat a lot. Nobody ever calls me on who's going to call a blind guy on cheating. But I enjoy getting out there. And then every once in a while, I'll outdrive my buddies. And so I get to harass them the rest of the day.
There you go.
Also, was an avid snow skier before the accident. I skied all over the western United States. I was sure I wasn't going to do that again as a blind guy. I'm not particularly brave. But about 10 months after the accident, a buddy of mine had me up on a top of a hill at Lake Tahoe learning to ski as a blind guy. I got to tell you, it's a combination of sheer exhilaration and terror skiing blind. But for those few minutes when you're on that run and you're just making your turns, you're no longer disabled. You're just skiing.
Hmm.
And it's so rewarding. I also played guitar a lot before the accident. I was in a failed rock and roll band in college, thus the hearing loss. But I learned, obviously, you can play guitar. I had to change some of the things I did. I had to practice to learn things to do it correctly. But I'm a better guitar player now than I was when I could see, which ain't saying much, but still. And also to keep busy during COVID, I took singing lessons online and just part of staying busy. So, I'm not a half bad singer now. I'm not great, but it was just something I was able to do. And I- I'm not trying to be braggadocious here. I'm not good at any of this stuff. I'm
Hmm.
average at a lot of things. But the importance is staying busy and just doing something. And so those were the things I was able to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I give you all the kudos for things that you're doing, singing, and more importantly, the skiing. I've been in a golf cart behind the wheel of a golf cart, and maybe going 2 miles an hour, but you feel like you're going 100 miles an hour when you
Yeah.
don't have that perception and so forth and that sensation. So kudos to you for getting back out on the slopes and having that experience and connecting with friends or family and having that shared experience versus saying that I can't do it or that my disability, my blindness is going to hold me back from doing the things I want to do. And that's part of that positive thinking and kind of overcoming some of those fears.
Yeah. And like I said, there is nothing special about me. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And some things I just couldn't do. You write those off, but until you try, you won't know.
Sure, absolutely. Other things that I know that you're very involved in, beside in the blindness community is, providing information about service dogs or guide dog, and you mentioned you have a guide dog, Orbit, that you do a lot of activities with. Can you share a little bit about your role as an ambassador, as a guide dog user?
And getting Orbit changed my life. So I'd been blind for 20 years when I finally got smart enough to get a guide dog. They're a huge commitment. They're just not like a pet. You've got to, groom them. You've got to feed them. You've got to care for them. They're with you all the time. But when I finally got Orbit, I got him a guide dogs to the desert in Palm Springs. He's a standard poodle. And I had to go out there for a month to learn how to use a guide dog. By that time, Orbit had been in training for 2 years. He was with puppy raisers for a year and a half, and then he was in guide dog training for 6 months. So by the time I got out to Palm Springs, he was fully trained. I was the wink link in the chain. I still am. Um, so we go out there and, eventually we're just walking around the campus. Initially, we're walking around the campus, but then eventually we're walking, down the streets of Palm Springs. And it gave me so much independence. It's hard to explain. And so when I got back, he's at my side all the time. When we travel the country to do speeches, where I go places on vacation, whatever, he's with me. He's with me here in my office right now. When I go out for a walk every night, except for now when it's 114 out. I don't want to overheat him or me.
Right.
So we're not doing that right now. But typically I go out on a walk every night, just to get out and get some exercise. When I go out in public, he has improved my social life so much. People never want to come over and ask you about your white cane.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing against white canes, but I go out with Orbit, and people just want to come over and talk to us. And I just love talking about him and what guide dogs do. Again, I wish I would have done a lot earlier, but I can't complain that he's given me so much.
Yes, you mentioned the word independence, and I say kind of freedom at the same time, right? Is you pick up the harness and you have to, give the dog the commands and things that they taught you at the guide dog school. The dog's doing his job, working, following those commands, following a path, the most safe and typically, straight line of direction to get to that endpoint that you're working towards. And so it's amazing how the efforts that are put through in the training program, whether it's the puppy raisers, the volunteers, and the trainers, the work that goes into that guide dog to be able to do those things. I always say, the guide dog, a cane helps you find all the obstacles in your path so you can go around them, or where a guide dog always removes those barriers, the obstacles in your path. And to me, I feel that is a lot easier to go through in life that way, is finding ways to improve yourself to remove those barriers. And for me, that's the right tool to do that. As you mentioned, also kind of from the social aspect, a little less, I think, awkwardness in public. That perception again, when people see a cane, I mean, someone who's blind, that there may be different perceptions and things that people grew up with, or what society says it should be, and the guide dog changes that. I think oftentimes changes that perception.
And another quick thing about guide dogs, they estimate that by the time I got Orbit, Guide Dogs of the Desert had invested $50,000 in him. That's their breeding program, their puppy raising program, their guide dog training, all the campus that goes with that, the payroll, the rent is very expensive. But the good news is that there's no cost for the user. So I went over there and I got this $50,000 guide dog for free. And if you want, they'll help you, with expenses as you go. Cost is not a reason not to get a guide dog.
Mm-hmm.
There are other reasons, but that's not one of them.
Yes, absolutely. As you mentioned, and as you were discussing, the need and investigation and searching for and getting and working a guide dog. And you mentioned that commitment. It's like having another kid. It's always, that fourth kid in the room in my house. There are definitely factors that go into, your lifestyle, what you want, what you expect out of a guide dog, and what guide dogs can really do. And having those things as thought for before getting a dog, and when you get home, having, some unreal expectations that the dog is going to solve all your mobility needs, and they don't always.
Yeah, that's right.
Connecting the services, things that you've done in your life, your books, and helping people change their thoughts or positive, from negative to positive thoughts, being more resilient, flexible, and working with different organizations, as whether it's the Guide Dogs of the Desert, as you mentioned, ACBVI, and really giving back to the community. Of those things, if you wouldn't mind sharing, maybe what does that bring to you, and then how does an organization like ACBVI give back or bring to the community?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, David. um, we are doing some very exciting things at the center right now. We have been at that campus at 32nd Street and Roosevelt for 70 some years. And we've been a tenant there for all that time. We take up about a third of the space that's there. Well, last April, we purchased the entire campus. And we have a goal, we have a dream. We want to build something called the Arizona Center for Empowerment. And what this is will be like a one stop shop for blind, visually impaired, hearing impaired people so they can come down and basically spend the day there. As you know, David, for blind people getting from point A to point B is one of the biggest hassles we face.
Mhm.
We have to rely on family and friends, public transit. Don't even get me started on dial-a-ride or Uber, which is very expensive.
Mhm.
And so our thinking is if we can get people down there and basically serve their needs for a whole day, it makes their life easier. So what we would like to do is to put tenants in there that can serve our clients. And our thinking is a client would come in the morning and go to, say, rehab services, voc rehab, whatever it may be, or go do social programs, arts and crafts or, wood turning, whatever they want to do. And then have lunch. We have a kitchen there so they can have lunch there. And then go to some of the other services that would be available. We've just entered into a contract with Terrace Health. We're going to have them on campus. So our clients will be able to get their white cane or their guide dog, go down the sidewalk, and go to a doctor's appointment. You don't have to get a
Mhm.
ride. You just go down the sidewalk. So there's your doctor's appointment. Great. You're sick. You need some medicine. There's going to be a pharmacy there. You know what a
Wow.
hassle that is. You get a ride to the doctor. Then you got to figure out how to get to the drugstore to
Mhm.
get your medicine. There'll be a pharmacy there. And when you're sick, you don't want all those extra challenges. So also have mental services available there right on campus. Then our goal, our dream is to put in some other things that might be interesting, might be beneficial, like a small convenience store. So you'd be able to go down the sidewalk, go to the convenience store, maybe get some stuff for the house. You need some, soap or shampoo or food or soda or beer, whatever you need. You can get it right there. You don't have to get a ride to another convenience store. Maybe put in a coffee shop and have our clients work at the coffee shop. Possibly put in a theater room. A lot of people don't realize blind people love movies.
Mhm.
With audio description, I sometimes get more out of a movie than my wife does. We went
Mhm.
and saw Top Gun Maverick the other day, and they were telling me things through audio description they weren't making clear in the movie. And I just love it when I'm
Mhm.
the one explaining parts of a movie. Great movie, by the way. Not a big Tom Cruise fan, but it's a great actor.
Right.
But these are just some ideas that we have that we eventually want to move towards. And again, allowing our clients to spend the whole day down there, not having to worry about a ride. When it comes to rides, we're working with ride hailing businesses that specialize in disabled people. That's great. But I'm proud to announce we just got two minivans that we're going to be able to start using soon. So we're going to be able to take more and more of our clients to and from their homes. What a great deal. We're going to have to remodel a huge chunk of the building. We're going to redo the whole front. We're going to have it make it look like it's new again. I'm preaching to the choir here, David. Full disclosure for your listeners, you mentioned you're on the board. You're also the chair of the construction committee. Thank you for that. You can probably tell more about it than I do at this point, but it's a huge undertaking. But I'm so excited because it's going to help our clients. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, there's so many new opportunities for an organization that has been around is when you meet someone who's blind or people have family members, oh, it's the center. Everybody went to the center. And the services you mentioned, from social recreational type services, but I think a lot of people don't really know. And you kind of hinted on about lunch and serving lunch. ACBVI, a lot of the clients have food insecurities, right? Is that right, Steve?
Oh, absolutely. Health securities, food securities. This is probably where you're going to go. I don't mean to steal your thunder, but so right now, actually, we're trying to serve breakfast and lunch. And then we're also having food available that our clients can come over and basically do some shopping, take some stuff home with them. Some of our clients, the only time they were eating was when they came to the center. They were going the whole weekend without eating. And
Hmm.
when our new executive director, Steve Tepper, found that out, he's like, we got to package some, meals for these people to take home. And so what we realized is there's a whole lot more to taking care of the human body than just their blindness. They've got all
Hmm.
kinds of ancillary issues. And every one of those we can solve is one less they have to figure out.
Absolutely. And yeah, I kind of tossed you a little softball there. And exactly it about the food insecurity and ACBVI doesn't charge their clients for that food. And so, those meals are given to people typically who don't have enough money to get, as you mentioned, food through the entire weekend, and or the resources to do that. And so, as an organization, it's taking a bigger approach to health and wellness than just as a vocational rehabilitation center to help people get back to work. It's a combination of all those things. And the organization really works within the community, partners with other organizations to provide those services, as you mentioned, Teros and some of the other organizations to help with the food donations. We're coming close to the end of our show. So, Steve, I want to ask, are there any other information or questions that maybe you would want to ask or propose to our listeners today and those out there that might want to know more about blindness or getting back to work in some of your journey? Maybe something that you typically would share with somebody.
I just had a couple of comments, David. First of all, both of my books are available through the Arizona Talking Book Library. There it is. And so, if you're interested in reading either one of those books, just contact them. What was my second point? It was a good one.
I'm sure. Well, I'm very appreciative. Steve, your story very inspirational. We've been kind of talking about here is really overcoming and becoming, the person you're meant to be and doing the things that you're supposed to be, and challenge yourself to go back to work against all those odds. Challenge yourself to be an entrepreneur and own your own business, challenging yourself to get out into the community on the road and tell your story, and raising a family and just living life. So thank you for sharing that with us today. Thank you for everything that you're doing at ACBVI and the support that you bring to that organization and to Guide Dogs of the Desert as well. I think all those things are really important for people to understand that there's so much that goes into our lives that help create who we are, right? Whether it's, you mentioned work and the confidence you get, the social network you build through employment, the financial independence, kind of status, all those things come through employment, come through your personal growth. It's just great to hear your story and your accomplishments. So thank you for doing that. I want to thank my sponsor today, Arizona Industries for the Blind. And we are an enterprise nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people to achieve their version, the American dream, whatever that is, through dignified employment, as well as thanking Phoenix Business RadioX. Daryl Robinson here in the studio is my producer today. Just goes to prove that with the right training, the right technology, and the right attitude, people who are blind can compete and live a full and inclusive life.
Thank you for listening to Changing the Perception of Blindness, One Conversation at a Time with your host, David Steinmetz. Be sure to subscribe to Changing the Perception of Blindness, One Conversation at a Time on your favorite podcast platform, and tune in live on Phoenix Business RadioX every third Friday at 1 p.m. We hope you feel inspired by today's conversation, and maybe we've even sparked a new idea or opportunity.